Hello and welcome to the Big Show. It is Paul Zeise, of course, for the Post-Gazette. We call it the Big Show. I don't think we actually have a name for the show other than the Big Show. Maybe if you have a better idea than the Big Show, we can come up with something that works and works well. But until then, we're going to just keep calling it the Big Show on the Post-Gazette and see what happens and go from there. The weekend was not really kind to Pittsburgh sports. Nonetheless, we are going to be here every day, and we'll continue to do things like we do them every single day. But we've got teams right now that just aren't cooperating in terms of generating a lot of interest now, do we? I guess we could start with the Penguins. They came back, or a couple of their guys, and obviously Mike Sullivan came back from the Nations deal, whatever it was called, Nations Four Nations, whatever the hell it was called. They came back, and they basically laid two eggs. I know Sidney Crosby obviously played a grinding, what I would call a very grinding, compact schedule in that Nations Four. And there's a lot of people that, say, well, wait a minute, what are you doing? Why are we allowing the players to do these things? And then it takes away from, what they're doing with their normal teams. I mean, yeah, I guess, but it was an all-star game. In lieu of an all-star game, it probably was the best thing that could have possibly happened. I thought it was really good for hockey. I thought it was exciting. Of course, the United States came up small, like they, tend to do in those things sometimes. Sidney Crosby did not play Saturday when the Penguins got smoked by the Rangers. By the Capitals. He did play on Sunday when the Penguins got beat up by the Rangers. I thought they played better against the Rangers than they did the Capitals, but nonetheless, two important key games in terms of where they're at in the standings and what they need, and they won 0-2, which is never a good thing. Didn't even get to overtime in either one to steal a point. So that leaves them, well, let's see. With 23 games left, they are right now 7 points out of a playoff spot. The problem they have is that the two teams that are in the wild card position that are ahead of them, Detroit and Ottawa, both also have 2 games in hand. We've seen the Penguins at times go on these runs where they're going to go, 10, 12, 13 games and win 12 out of 13, something like that. Barring something like that, it's over for the Penguins. Let's face it. I mean, 23 games left. Let's say they go, 13-10 or 13-8-2, right? Which is, given how they've played, asking a lot, right? 13-8-2, that would give them 26, 27, 28 more points. That would put them somewhere, let's see, if you add that to what they have, and we're talking about 87, 88 points, that's probably not going to be enough. Actually, it's not going to be enough. They probably need to get to about 92 to 94 points to have a chance to make the playoffs. You look where Ottawa is, they're 50, they got 52, they've got 62 points, 57 games, which means they've got 25 games left. If they go 13-2 or 13-12 in those 27 games, that's 26 points. That puts them at 88. 14 and 12, that puts them at 90, 91. So it's going to be a chase for the Penguins, but obviously the biggest problem the Penguins have, and we'll talk about the Penguins a little bit later in the show. There's problems that I think the Penguins have that they're not going to be able to overcome. And now they've got to start thinking about how they're going to basically be able to get out of some of the contracts they have and make some trades. Now, Pitt Hoops. They basically had to hit an inside straight in some ways just to get to the tournament. I think. That was before they lost to Notre Dame on Saturday. Now, it was an away loss, so it doesn't hurt them quite as much, but that's going to be a difficult one to overcome. If they were, you saw these bracketology things. They were all basically in a place where, last four out, next four out. I saw one where it was like they were like the next four after the, first four out and next four out. Who's the next four? Pitt was there. Pitt was right on the cusp. By losing to Notre Dame, they put themselves in a really bad spot. And it was a bad game. So I have some thoughts about that as well. I also have some thoughts in general about the Pirates and what we've seen from them so far, but we'll get into all that stuff. As is usually the case, today, I guess there was some more rumblings about the Steelers in a quarterback position. And today, obviously, it was again with the Matthew Stafford stuff. I mean, the Matthew Stafford stuff is just never going to go away until he ends up somewhere. It sounds to me like it's pretty clear that the Rams want to move on from him for whatever reason. I'm not sure why, to be honest, because it feels like even though he makes a lot of money, he's their guy. And that's what it comes down to. But part of it is Matthew Stafford is asking for $50 million a year. If he wants $50 million a year, then it makes sense for anyone to want to move on from him because he's not that guy anymore. By the same token, if before you jump out and say, no, that's not what, there's no way that anyone's going to pay him that. That's not what he's worth. I look at the top paid quarterbacks and I will tell you this, it's sort of what the market is. Now, I don't know that he's, a guy that we would, 100% say, well, this is a guy who I would pay that kind of money to. But again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 guys make $50 million or more. Now, you can sit here and say, Jalen Hurts just won a Super Bowl. He's young. Lamar Jackson is an MVP candidate. He's young. Justin Herbert is young. Jared Goff is not young, right? But he's still only 31. Tua is 27. Trevor Lawrence is 26. Jordan Love is 27. Joe Burrow is still 29. Those are the guys that are making the most money. The one guy that's sort of an outlier there is Dak Prescott. He's 32 years old and he makes the most, $60 million. If you ask me, I'd rather have Matthew Stafford than Dak Prescott. The rest of that list, though, I'm not sure I'd take Stafford over any of those guys. And then you go beyond Jalen Hurts. Okay, Kyler Murray makes $46 million. I think Matthew Stafford is is better than Kyler Murray. Deshaun Watson, well, we don't even have to talk about that. Kirk Cousins, don't even have to talk about that. The two guys who now seem very much underpaid, Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, $45 and $43 million. Matthew Stafford's at $40 million. To be honest, I would say $40 million is where he should be. So to me, I look at it from a big picture standpoint. The first question I say is, why are the Rams so hell-bent on getting rid of him? They don't have anyone as good as he is. They don't have anyone as good as he is. Period. And I think that's the most important thing. They don't have anybody as good as him, and they don't have any ability really to go get somebody like him. But it is amazing to me that it's all important. It's all important to me to suggest that if you're the Rams, is it just a matter of your cap space? That you're looking to clear cap space? Because I think Matthew Stafford's still a pretty good quarterback. Is he what he was 3 or 4 years ago? No. Is he $50 million? I wouldn't give him $50 million. But again, if you're a team that needs a quarterback, he's better than most. He's better than most. Where the sticking point for the Steelers would be if they have to give him $50 million and give up a first-round draft choice to get him. That would be probably the sticking point with the Steelers. But at the end of the day, the story today is the Steelers are one of 4 teams that have really looked into Matthew Stafford, and they're interested in signing him, and they're interested in maybe trading for him and all that stuff. He's still pretty good. But my thing is, you're talking about giving up a first-round pick, which I'm okay with because picks, you never know what they're going to become. And secondly, you're talking about giving up $50 million a year. That's a big, big piece of money for your cap. So all I'm saying is I look at it and I say, Matthew Stafford, it's weird to me that the Rams are so quick and so willing to want to move on from him. By the same token, if he's going to cost that much money under their cap, I understand they probably want some cap relief. And if that's the case, well, then go ahead and do it. Somebody's going to give them first-round pick for him. Somebody's going to give him a first-round pick. I mean, if you look at what he is and what he's capable of doing still to this day, he's still one of the better quarterbacks out there. In fact, if you look at where he was at this year in passing, was he one of the top 5 passers in the league? No, he wasn't. And I don't know that he'll be that in a long, long time. But he threw for 3,700 yards, 20 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. And he did that on a team that had a lot of their biggest weapons were either hurt or hobbled or slowed or whatever. So to me, if you look at the guys that are out there that are starting in the NFL, he's still better than probably more than half of them. I would probably rank him in the 10 to 12 or 13 range. And if that's the case, it means you're going to have to pay a little bit for him. It means you're going to have to go and give up something for him. So I don't know that I love the idea of the Steelers trading for Matthew Stafford because I don't know that Matthew Stafford is the piece that gets them over the top. And I'm just gonna tell you that I would tell you is it's important that you're going to have to get first. You're going to have to give up a first-round pick to get him. I don't believe that they'll let him go for a second-round pick or a third-round pick or a combination of anything else. I think you're going to have to give up a first-round pick to get him. And if you're going to do that, then you're going to have to be willing to pay him. I think it's important to know that. I really do. It's important to know what you're willing to give up. And the other question that I have, and I think a lot of people have this question, is this. Are the Steelers really Matthew Stafford away from being a contender? That's the question that I think people need to ask. Would they, all right, let's put Matthew Stafford on this team. Are they now equipped to go beat Baltimore, Buffalo, Kansas City, even Houston, those kind of teams in the playoffs? If you give them Matthew Stafford. Because if you give them, you're number one, you're giving up your first-round pick, and number two, you're giving up a big piece of your salary cap. So to me, what are we talking about, really? What are we talking about in terms of the Steelers? Are they going to be able to make themselves good at all of the other areas and make them better at all of the other areas? I just don't think that's the case. I really don't. It's just one of those situations in my mind where it's a pipe dream in so many ways. But I just don't think the Steelers are going to go and do what what people are talking about in order to go get Matthew Stafford. So while it makes for a nice story, I guess, people were talking about it a little bit, I guess, it doesn't do a whole lot for me because it seems like it's another one of these fictional stories. The funny thing about it is, on Sunday, I read a story that the Steelers had no interest in Matthew Stafford. And then today I read, well, they have interest in him, and they're one of 4 teams. Again, my plan for the Steelers have not changed even a little bit from the start. My plan for the Steelers has been simple. Sign Justin Fields for as little as possible. I mean, if he'll take $12 million a year for 3 years or something like that, give it to him. Doesn't hurt your cap at all. And go make yourself better at all the other spots. That's what I would tell you is the plan. If Justin Fields doesn't work out and you go, 6 and whatever next year, then you have an opportunity maybe to draft a quarterback when next year's crop of quarterbacks is allegedly better than this year's. So I'm just telling you, I think that this overthinking that goes on because of all of the different ways that people want to, link every quarterback to the Steelers, I've yet to hear a legitimately good option. Daniel Jones stinks. Russell Wilson, we saw that show last year, and he apparently doesn't get along with the offensive coordinator. And he would cost you probably twice as much, if not a little bit more, than what you can get Justin Fields for. Aaron Rodgers is done. And now this Matthew Stafford thing is going, again, it's almost like we're really excited about doing everything in our power to acquire a name for fantasy football. So someone here says Justin Fields 2 years and $40 million. I don't think it's going to take $20 million to sign Justin Fields. I just don't. I could be wrong, way wrong. But if he gets much more than $15 million a year, $16 million a year, his agent is doing a really good job. Honestly, to me, it is stick with Justin Fields. At this point, you're not going to trade up to try and get, Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders. You're not. You're not going to trade up to get any of these guys. You're not. You're not going to, the Steelers, we know how they operate. They trade up. Yeah. Have they traded up in the draft before? Yeah. 8 or 9 spots, whatever it was, 10 spots to get, I know they traded up to get Troy Polamalu. They traded up to get, I think, didn't they get traded up to get Broderick Jones? But at the end of the day, for the most part, they don't do that. They don't do that. They're not going to trade up 15 or 18 spots or whatever it's going to take for them to get a quarterback. So the quarterback talk is old and stale. It's silly. At this point, it's people just with pipe dreams. Sign Justin Fields. Give him what you think he's going to get. Give him what what he'll take. And make the rest of your team better. Because the rest of the team needs to get better. And the way you do that is good draft picks and money. And guess what? If you use draft capital, get a guy like Matt Stafford, and money to get Matt Stafford, then you can't go and make yourself better like you can at this point. You've got $60 million in cap space. Let's say Justin Fields is $15 million. All right, now you got $45 million in cap space. Might even be a couple more million after you restructure some deals and all the things you're going to do. $45 million. And if you do that, guess what? You're in a much better place. You got $45, $46, $47 million to spend. You have all your draft picks in place. Now you have the ability to go and strategically make your team better. And we've talked about ad nauseum all the different ways that you can make your team better. This team, at least. Now, this week is the combine, and the NFL makes us believe more than anybody else that it's important for us to sit around and watch these guys work out. I don't know. I don't get into it, but some people do. But it will be interesting to see this week, who the Steelers are really interested in watching. And, Ray Fittipaldo and Chris Carter are out there. So hopefully I'll be able to have one of them on this week just to talk about what's going on out there. Reality is the draft is the first step. But when free agency happens, The Steelers have to be bold and go out and get some guys that are going to really make their team better. Trading for Dante Jackson really didn't make you better. Dante Jackson is just sort of a guy. That's the reality. It's just sort of a guy. Go sign a corner that is really going to make an impact for you. Go sign a defensive lineman that's going to make an impact for you. Go sign a receiver that's going to make an impact for you. Then go draft a couple of guys. That's what you have to do if you're looking to make the Steelers a better team. Not go with all these retread quarterbacks I keep hearing about. It's just really not that interesting to me because none of it's going to happen. I mean, I'd be very shocked if any of it happens. It wouldn't even shock me if they signed Fields and Wilson both, but we'll have to see with that. Now, the game's always on at Archie's. Get down to Archie's on Carson. Archie's, home of 80-cent wings, Monday through Thursday, home of the Paul Zeise grilled cheese sandwich. Get down to Archie's and tell them that I sent you. Usually I'd be there on a Monday night. I'd actually be doing my show from there on a Monday night, but I'm a little under the weather today. So that's why I'm doing it from basically 5 feet from my bed, because as soon as I'm done with this, I'll be laying back down. I don't know if any of you have dealt with this flu thing or whatever, but boy, is it rough. And so I've had a rough weekend, but hopefully I'm getting to the end of it. Now, the Penguins. Let's talk about the Penguins. It's a little bit fresher and more interesting to me because the Penguins are coming up on the trade deadline. And I think one of the things about the Penguins is they've been sort of one of those teams that has done everything in their power to hold out hope that, you know what, we're going to try and get Sidney Crosby one more shot at glory. Now, I argued 3 years ago that they should have moved on from everybody but Sidney Crosby, and that meant, the two stars, Letang and Malkin, and really tried to rebuild around them. And the reason I said that was because I said your path to getting Sidney Crosby back to the top is tearing the Band-Aid off and rebuilding. And I would look at no further than the Washington Capitals, right? The Washington Capitals, if you look at what they're doing and how they're doing it, they still have Ovechkin, right? But the group that won the Stanley Cup is almost all gone. I guess Backstrom still plays for them, but for the most part, a lot of those guys are gone. And they have a new cast of characters now that are trying really hard. And guess what? They're better. They're better than they were. And they're one of the actually more exciting teams in the league. So when you look at what their roster was when they won the Stanley Cup, they came back the next year, they tried to do it again. They weren't afraid to start breaking it up. And guess what? The Capitals are a team who are in far better shape. In other words, if you ask me right now, is Alex Ovechkin or Sidney Crosby more likely to win one more cup? The answer is Ovechkin by a mile. And not because I'm saying he's a better player, but he's on a better team. And they're a lot closer to winning a cup than the Penguins are. So now it has to come down to, this is the time when you've got to basically now figure out, if you're the Penguins, are we interested in really doing what we've needed to do for a while? And that is cleaning house of some of these older guys and cleaning house of some of this older philosophy that you've had and committing to a youth movement. One of the biggest problems, though, the Penguins have is that the goaltender that they committed to, Tristan Jarry, is not good. And none of these other guys are good. Blomqvist might be good enough. At some point, he's not ready to be a great NHL goalie right now. He'd be better off in AHL right now, to be honest. He's just not quite ready. He has moments where you say, boy, I can see the talent, but he's got time that he needs. He needs to get better and better and better and better. But one of the dumbest things that the Penguins have done is all these no trade clauses. I mean, there are guys on this team that when I've heard about their contract situation, I'm like, why are you giving him a no trade clause? Great example. No offense to the guy, because I think he's a good player and he's been a great ambassador for the Penguins and everything. But why does Brian Rust merit a no trade clause? I don't understand that. And there's a lot of guys that are in that sort of, obviously. But here's what I would do if I was the Penguins. First thing I'd do is I would trade Tristan Jarry out of here just to get him out of your system and to make sure, and if you have to give up maybe even a prospect to get somebody to take him, I would do that. Second thing I would do, I would basically go to Erik Karlsson, Chris Letang, and say, listen, it's not happening here. Could you at least pick a couple of teams that you'd be interested in going to? And if they gave me even one team, I would make a deal to get rid of them, to move on from those two guys, to get their money off the books and all that other good stuff. And the third part of that is Malkin, who everything I've read, everything I've heard, people I talk to that I've trust, everybody that is around the Malkin camp seems to think he's going to retire and go back to Russia at the end of this year. Well, if that's the case, to me, it shouldn't be that hard to make the case to him. Listen, if you're going to go back to Russia and you're going to do that, and you've got all these personal issues around you going on and things, you know what? Why don't you help us out? Why don't you allow us to trade you to a contender? You get one more shot at, playing in the playoffs and trying to get to the playoffs. And you know what? You go out on top, but you allow us to trade you for assets. Now, one of the things I will tell you is I don't know what Malkin brings back, but he probably brings back something. Karlsson probably brings back something. I mean, Jarry, because of his contract, I'm not exactly sure what he brings back. But the bottom line is if you move on from that group and these guys, I would even say at the end of the season, you talk to Mike Sullivan about, hey, it's probably time. Let's get a new voice, a new philosophy. We got a lot of young guys. We're going to try and go forward in a different direction. Now, Mike Sullivan's a good coach. So if they decide they want to keep him around, I don't have a problem with that either. But it feels like this is the point, okay, where there's no more – let's try and trick it up so that we can slop together enough wins to get to the playoffs. And maybe in the playoffs, Crosby and company catch lightning in a bottle and we go and make one more run. That's never happening now. It's not happening. And I think this weekend, not getting a single point out of those two games at home probably is the end. And so now you look ahead to the trade deadline and you say, you know what? We've tried to keep it together as much as we can. We had a little spurt where we were playing better for a little bit. But at the end of the day, right now, we're literally looking at 7 losses in our last 10 games. You got 2 against Philadelphia, who stink. But then you got Boston, Toronto, Colorado, Vegas. I mean, you have a stretch where you're going to probably lose 3 or 4 more games. And those are stretches you can't afford to have if you're legitimately going to try and get back into the playoff chase. But to me, stop chasing the playoffs. I think the Penguins, I give them credit. They probably went 2 years longer than I would have trying to chase ghosts. But I got to be honest with you. It is over. It is over. And unless you're willing to acknowledge that, it's never going to get better. It's never going to get better. So do the things you have to do. The biggest issue with the Penguins in the offseason, I don't care what they have to do, they need to find a goalie, period. Because that's where we can start. Their goalie is not good enough. Whoever it is, whether it's Ned, whether it's Blomqvist, whether it's Jarry, whoever the hell they put in the goal, the guy has not been good enough. There's been, flashes here and there and some games where they played well and all that. They're NHL players. They're going to have good games. But at the end of the day, over an 82-season grind, they do not have a guy to be their goalie. Period. That's been a big part of their problem. But it's time to just rip the Band-Aid off and be for real. Stop, kidding yourselves. The second thing is they've got to try and rebuild, I would say, their second and third lines as much as their third and fourth lines. They've got to find some young blood to bring in. They've got to find some guys that can really, really score. They're just not very good consistently at any area. So this could be a little bit of a rebuild. And me, being me, you're looking at Sidney Crosby. He's not getting younger. 2 or 3 years ago, if you had done this undertaking and gone forward and rebuilt and all that other stuff, we might be talking about the Penguins being like where the Capitals are right now. And then you would say, okay, they've got a real shot. Now, I don't know that the Capitals are going to win the Stanley Cup. That's not what I'm saying. But if you watch them play, got a lot of energy. They've got a lot of burst. They've got a lot of good young players and good players. They're playing really well right now. So we'll see. And actually, if I'm looking at it correctly, right now they have by far the most points in the East. They're a good team, a really good team. Well, they were willing to go through some really tough times, I think. And so that's really what it comes down to for me. They've had some coaching changes, moved on from a couple of coaches who were, at least successful and all that other stuff. And they basically have been bold in how they did it. And they weren't afraid to, bottom out a little bit. Even though they had Ovechkin on their team, they weren't afraid, period. In 2021, they had 77 points. And they had a pretty good season. Then they went back to 80 points. They've had less. They've missed the playoffs. They missed the playoffs. What was this now? 4 out of 6 years they missed the playoffs, or 3 out of 5 years they missed the playoffs. And then guess what? They were able to do what they're doing now. So to me, if you were the Penguins, you could have done the same thing as well. You could have done the same thing as well, but you didn't. And so to me, I feel like it's always important to remember that. Secondly, I think it's just important to note that the Penguins, I get it. They want to sell tickets. You got Sidney Crosby. You've got to be bold if you want to sell tickets. Looking at at Pitt real quickly. Listen, when the one caveat when we talk about moving on from Mike Tomlin and Mike Sullivan is Pitt. It was time for Jamie Dixon to move on. There's no question it was the right time when they moved on from him. But at the end of the day, in the 9 seasons since he's left, they've made the NCAA tournament once, and they're not going to make it this year. So it's all about who you hire and all that stuff. Pitt can't afford to. They cannot afford to fire Jeff Capel. They can't afford the buyout. They know that. One thing they could do, however, is do what Robert Morris did, which is the AD step in and say, you've got to change your staff and make these changes going into next year. And guess what? Robert Morris went from one of the worst teams in the Horizon League to one of the best teams in the Horizon League in one season. That's unfortunately something that you have to do. There has to be changes in the Pitt basketball program. It's not going to be Capel because they can't afford it, but there has to be changes. So to me, your staff has to change. You have to maybe make some changes in the way that you recruit. But at the end of the day, there's got to be some changes because this isn't working. This is year 7. Understandably, he inherited a dumpster fire at a time right before COVID. So there was, a bunch of nonsense that went on his first couple of years. But we're in year 7 now. And you're losing to Notre Dame and Virginia and some of these teams. Bad. The ACC is so bad right now. It's that's what makes it even worse. It'd be one thing if this was like 10 years ago and it was the ACC where the top 10 teams were all going to go to the NCAA tournament. That'd be one thing. But it's not that this year. I mean, they're going to get 3 indefinitely, and I'm sure the committee will just gift them 1 to make sure that they get 4 because they are a power conference. So changes need to be made. I'm just not sure that Pitt is going to be willing to make those changes. At any rate, we'll do it all week. We'll have Ray and Chris from Indianapolis this week. I have a special guest I'll talk to you about later this week. We'll do a bunch of different things and have fun. Again, we do it every day, right about 5 o'clock, and we get going. So hopefully as more people find us, we'll continue to enjoy and build on this and make it something that is an enjoyable experience every single day.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.